All right. I think we are ready to go. Um, Good morning, everyone, again, and welcome to um, our fiscal year-end meeting for the payroll side. It's crazy to think that it's that time already, but here we go. It's going to be the end of June and that time before we know it. The good news is nothing has changed. So we're, going to step through the process today. But for those of you that have been through it, in the past, there's really no changes. So that's a good thing. We do have a new look that I wanted to point out. Sorry, I'm still admitting a few people here. Don't mean to be distracting. Sorry about that. We do have a new look. For those of you that have been out to our meetings and trainings page, I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it. There we go. You may have noticed that under the year-end meeting materials that we do have, our different fiscal year-end applications broken out now. So the one that we're gonna, look at today is the USPS ITC fiscal year end, um, the item we have highlighted here. So just a quick look at that, and I'm sure you guys, have all been out here and maybe seen it yourself. But if I click to our meetings and trainings page here, see if it's going to come up for me. It's not had enough coffee either, I guess. Okay, so here's what we're talking about. So under the year-end meeting materials, we now have these broken out instead of it just being listed. Like you'll see the calendar year-end one hasn't been updated yet. We're now breaking these out, because we're gonna have so much to cover in each application. It might, make more sense and be easier to just click on this link here, and that's going to take you then to this page. And this page here has everything that we're going to talk about today. So it has our PowerPoint presentation, the checklist. We've also, included some quick links here to some helpful uh, uh, resources, the, STRS calculating service credit, their, specific service credit guidelines, the annual report layout, the link to our STRS advanced chapter, and then just a quick link to that mass change definition if you have a situation where you do need to take a district out of the advance, or, run that for any reason. We have a quick, access to grab that as well. What we're going to focus on is the PowerPoint presentation. And as you'll know, as we go through, I can move right along to these pre-closing steps. This should link up, this PowerPoint presentation should link up with the actual checklist. So, the first step here should link to the first step in our checklist under the pre-closing steps. So, hopefully this is helpful for you, when you go to have your own fiscal year end meeting with your districts. You can use, both of these in conjunction with each other or one or the other, however it makes most sense to you to present the material. But we should be able to follow right along the PowerPoint and, have those steps linked, accordingly, excuse me, in the checklist. Okay. All right, so we're going to dive right in here. As I mentioned, the first step, is to think about any of those employees that might be retiring as of June 30th. And if you're, before their last pay is processed basically. And, get those life insurance payments processed through a payroll. So you would post, they would post those in payroll payments, current or future. If their last pay is processed, and this is missed, it's not, there's really no harm done. They would just have to process an core adjustment to get those that payment recorded, for W-2 time. So anything that's highlighted here in kind of this soft blue color, it should be an actual link to something. So in this case, it's linked to the IRS's publication 15B, and that is a reference to how to calculate the cost of life insurance. And in particular, if you pay attention to pages 14 through 16 here, that's gonna point you in the right direction to calculate those costs and work through any questions you might have with the cost of life insurance. All right. Next is, going out and making sure that the STRS advanced configuration has a couple settings set accordingly. And one is to make sure that a checkbox that says verify organization is in the advanced mode for July pays is marked. So I know it's kind of tiny here and it's highlighted. It's probably kind of hard to see, but if your district is one that does, process the advance, which I know, most generally that is the case. I think there might be just a couple exceptions throughout the state, so we can't make this default, in assume that it's going to work for everybody, because that's not the case. For those districts that do process the advance, we want to make sure that checkbox, that box is marked. What happens then is if they would mistakenly process a July pay and they have not created their STRS advance submission file, then it's going to produce an error, and it says that, the advance must be processed before they run a July pay. So hopefully that's a red flag. It tells them, hey, stop. You need to complete your submission file first, and then you can come back and process your July pay. If you have a district that are one of those few that do not process the STRS advance, then they would want to leave that box unmarked, and then it will not produce that error, and they can just continue on processing their July pay just as they normally would. Okay. The next pre-closing step is to verify again on that STRS advanced configuration screen that the advanced amount is 0, which it should be at this time. We're going to talk about that field a little bit later. And then the advanced mode checkbox should also be unmarked. Now this is really something that we want to make a habit of, at either somebody at the ITC or somebody at the district going out and checking once they know their advance is complete. So we really don't want to be waiting until this point to be checking those. After the summer pays are over, we want to make it a habit of, going out and making sure that these two fields get checked at that time. And again, I'm going to touch on this in a little bit more detail later this morning, but if we know that these fields have not been checked up until this point, please go out and check this now. It probably means that the advance didn't balance from last year. And so some steps will be, needed to be taken so that we can clear that out and start fresh for this year. All right. And at this point, even though the June pays haven't been processed, they can be running their STRS advance reports and looking at those, checking everything they can up until this point, and making sure that, they're not going to run into any problems going forward. So the first report they're going to want to run is that non-advanced report, positions report. If they have a whole slew of, teachers, people listed on that report that should not be, typically that's just a handful of people, like maybe your superintendent, sometimes your principals. If you have pages and pages, listed, then we know something's wrong. Most generally, it's because the days worked are not going to meet the work days as of June 30th. So at this time, if there's still pays remaining and those day counts are off, then, they can add a work day to a weekend or a non-work day. And then when they process their payroll, that's going to update those days worked and also the amount earned. That's a key part. And I think we forget about that a lot. So please remember, if you're touching the days worked at all, probably the amount earned is also not correct. So we want to make sure that those two kind of go hand in hand, which is also going to then offset or, update the accrued wage field, which is a key factor in the advance. Okay, so they would add the workday, they would post the payroll. That's going to then update the days worked, the amount earned, which in turn will update the accrued wage amount, and then they can remove the workday. If it's not a retirement day issue, that's gonna update their days and everything's gonna be good there. They can remove the day and that fixes, and it should then advance those employees. If it doesn't, then, we need to look in a different area to decide, why that's not happening. But 99% of the time, that does the trick. The other two reports then, I'm sure you're all familiar with, the advanced positions report. So again, run that non-advanced positions report first. If we have, issues with that, we're going to fix that first. And then we can move on to the advanced positions report. Excuse me. Make sure that the amount due looks correct. The advanced amount looks correct. All those rehired retirees, are they being reported correctly? And then obviously their service credit. So these are all, areas and things that we can be looking at now before it gets to, be crunch time and it's, too late and there's more work involved. And then lastly is the advanced fiscal year to date report. And again, be checking the service credit, the STRS days up to this point, the earnings, the advanced amount, the rehired retiree information. All right. So just a reminder about, service days. Those are a count from the employee's job calendar plus any attendance and absence days. So these days have to have a pay date stamped on them to be included in the count. So remember that. Dock days, those use the activity date. So we don't have to worry about a pay date stamp on dock days. All right. I should have mentioned, if you guys have any questions at any time, please feel free, to unmute yourself and ask the question. You don't have to wait till the end, or if you want to put it in the chat, we'll try to keep an eye on that as well. So that's kind of the pre-closing procedures, things that, we want to try to be, mindful of now and looking at before we actually get into the closing process itself. The month-end closing steps, that's your typical month-end closing. We're going to balance the payroll clearance account. We're going to reconcile, those checks. We're going to process any monthly, outstanding payables, verify the outstanding payables at this point, and make note of any of those for balancing purposes. We're going to run the STRS monthly report, the SERS monthly report, the census report. Again, those are optional. Some districts run those, some districts don't. The afford report, again, that's optional for those districts that use that report for reporting purposes. Process any benefit accruals if it's the appropriate time. Again, you can create those outstanding payables reports so that if you need those for balancing purposes, and then we want to verify the days, the weeks, for ODJFS, SERS, and STRS. And if we need to, post any core adjustments to make those correct, we can. So, month end, they process that once a month. So, hopefully they're comfortable and they probably have their own means to check things and verify things, and that should come pretty natural. Quarter end, the same kind of, quarter end closing steps that they're used to, 3 other quarters throughout the year. Again, I should point out, this is highlighted, in that lighter blue, so it's a link directly to our quarter end closing checklist, the same with the month end closing checklist here. So they'll balance their quarter, and they probably have some means of, some sort of spreadsheet or process to balance their quarter. We do, suggest that they balance their W-2 report. They also want to verify all outstanding payables, balance all board paid payroll items if they track those or process those through the system. Complete and file all their quarter end submission forms, and then balance and submit their ODJFS. So again, not anything different when it comes to quarter end either. Now we're going to get into the actual fiscal year end closing steps. So this is something, that might not be as familiar because they're processing this, once a year. And I don't know about you, but, I have to get myself in the right mindset for fiscal year end time. Like, okay, here we go. The first thing that can be done is run the wage obligation, benefit obligation, and SERS surcharge reports. So those might be helpful later. So we do ask that, those be run now, copies of those kept, so that, they're easily accessible when those times come, maybe for auditing purposes. Those wage obligation and benefit obligation reports can become so helpful, later. So we can, assure that they're run in the proper format that's going to work best, when those times come. So run those reports now. We also want to, again, obviously they're going to run their STRS advanced reports, and they're going to verify, this is kind of the final run, so to speak. So we want to make sure that all the information that's on these reports is as accurate as possible. So Some things that they want to consider at this time, before they actually, go through and complete the fiscal year end STRS advance process is early contract payoffs. So if they're aware of those, now go in and change, the number of pays in contract so that, calculates out their, final pay correctly. You do want to be cautious of that pay per period changing, and make sure that, is as expected. The other thing, that can be helpful is, if there are any docs that they're aware of that are gonna happen over the summer months, we can actually go into payroll payments future and we can, enter those, doc payments now. And when the STRS advance reports are run, then it should reduce that advanced employee amount, so that it takes the doc into consideration. If not, what will happen is what was reported to STRS as, what they're expecting over the summer to basically be, reported for that employee will be higher than what actually happened. So there will be a balancing issue at the end. And that, sometimes districts aren't always aware that these situations are gonna happen. So, they'll just have to take that into consideration when, they process their final pay, and if there's an amount still outstanding, and it doesn't balance, that docs, are one of the key, balancing issues. So they'll just have to make note of that and keep that in mind. I did want to point out that, if it's not the appropriate time, if that next payroll is not the appropriate time to process that doc, then they'll want to remove it and then process that at the appropriate time. But we just want to take those amounts into account, when they process their advance. All right, so again, they're gonna balance all three reports, and we're gonna go into some detail as far as, what that means and looks like on, each report. So when they process the STRS advance report option, they'll enter, the start and the end date for the academic year. And then, they'll be running each of these, report options. Again, probably helpful to run maybe the non-advanced positions report first and make sure that everybody that's listed on that report is what's expected. And then maybe move to the advanced positions report and then the advanced fiscal year to date report. Doesn't have to be run in that order, but it might be helpful, just so, you can be checking things, kind of for the final time or as they should be. We're gonna kind of go down the line here, in order of, from left to right. So we're gonna first talk about the fiscal year to date report. Again, this is a report that lists all employees that are subject to, any STRS withholding for the fiscal year. So, we've listed the criteria to be included in the report. That being, they have to have a position with the retirement code equaling STRS. They also have to have earnings in the fiscal year, and any earnings, in the fiscal year, what does that mean, or what's the system looking at to know if there's any earnings? For an advancing compensation, the accrued wages will be added to the earnings. So that is, the accrued wages are the contract obligation minus the amount paid minus the amount docked. So we also look at the core adjustments with the payroll type equaling STRS, so the 450 record, and the type of total gross. And again, that transaction date has to be within the fiscal year. We also look at the applicable gross on the, the history side. So any STRS payroll items paid to the employee on payrolls that have a pay date within the fiscal year. The employee must have a compensation with the following: the type equaling contract, and then the compensation start date and stop date, that range must fall within the academic date range that was entered in when those dates that we entered in W-2 report. And the number of pays paid cannot be equal to the pays in the contract or the compensation has been paid in the fiscal year. So it's kind of a lot, long equation there. But hopefully spelling it all out, if you have a situation where something's not looking like it should, we can, go through the checklist, so to speak, and go down the list and say, oh, this is where it doesn't meet this criteria and falls out. If the employee has a non-contract compensation, then we just have to have dates that fall again within the fiscal year. All right. Okay. And just, examples of, you guys probably are all familiar with these reports, but just kind of spelling it out here. This is an example of what the advanced fiscal year to date report would look like. And we have the totals then at the total section at the bottom. When it comes to, kind of balancing and looking at the report in more detail, the service credit part is obviously a key piece to all this reporting. We want to make sure that, full-time employees that have 120 days are, they should be receiving 100% of credit, 100% service credit. Those that have less than 120 days, they're going to receive then the service credit based on the STRS decision tree. And what determines whether an employee is flagged as a full-time or part-time employee is based on that full or part-time field on the 450 record. So that field here dictates kind of, how the service credit is going to be calculated on a full-time basis or a part-time basis. And again, when it comes to how an employee should be reported, we do advise, that you direct those kind of questions to STRS, just because, they're the experts. They're going to be able to, you districts can talk through their specific situation with the expert, and they'll be able to, direct them then with, oh, this should be reported as a part-time employee. This should be reported as a full-time employee. And then we can go back and look at how the flag's set on the 450 record and make those changes if needed. Excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. All right. One thing that I wanted to point out, we did have some discussion at the end of last fiscal year as far as, STRS's employment relationship. And so I just wanted to point out that, the employment relationship value when it comes to STRS may not be the same as the compensation, days worked value. The days employed used in the service credit calculation is generated by the start date of the academic year and the end date in the academic year when, running the STRS advanced reports. So typically that is, July 1st through June 30th. The system looks at the employee hire date as the start date if that is after the start date that's entered when the STRS advanced report is run. And it will also look at the termination date and use that date if it's before the ending date of the academic year, the ending academic date year value when running the STRS advanced report. So this comes in, it comes into play, that's the word I was looking for, when you have part-time employees. So just be mindful of this, or somebody that, starts, and they have a part-time, they're calculated as part-time and they have less than 90 days, that employment relationship. So it's a very, very, very small group of people, but I know that, last year we did have some questions on service credit and calculating, those that, had less than 90 days, and they were getting a higher percentage of service credit than what, was expected. So if you do have those situations, please reach out and we'll be happy to work through that together. Again, it's a very, very small, sampling of people, but I did want to point out, kind of the difference in that employment relationship and the days worked. Some additional notes is to keep in mind that the reemployed retirees, they will always have, or should always have, service credit equaling a 0%. So they'll have 0%, and then they'll also have that hired retiree flag set to a Y. So if there is service credit calculated for an employee, that's a rehired retiree, then the system's gonna flag an error. So we would want to fix that, if they're a rehired retiree for the entire year. So there are situations where they retired mid-year, and so, the first half of the year, they would not be considered a rehired retiree, and then the second half they would. So there are those, situations as well. But for any, situation that they're considered a rehired retiree, the service credit will always be 0. So I know sometimes people, that just slips your mind and we forget that. So I wanted to point that out as well. We do have a section in, the STRS Advanced chapter that addresses, the rehired retiree correction situation. So maybe there's, times where that this was forgotten. So they should have been considered a rehired retiree, months ago, and they're just now remembering that. We have steps in the chapter that outline how to correct that. So again, it's highlighted here in that baby blue, so it should be linked to the chapter, and you can go there and it'll take you to the steps to correct those situations. I also did want to point out, that STRS, on their website, they have a whole, many helpful resources. So again, that's linked, on this slide. I'm going to hop over to their website just to show you one in particular that can be super helpful is this service credit calculator. Let me back out. I kind of got ahead of myself here. So under employer reporting, if we go to the annual reporting, and again, the link, that I have, linked in that, slide takes you directly to this page, so you wouldn't have to necessarily know how to get there. But there are, several different links here that I find helpful myself. And one is the accrued contributions fact sheet. That's very helpful. So it kind of steps you through some frequently asked questions, anything, all about accrued wages. Oops. The annual reporting requirements. So again, all of those sorts of things. And then their service credit takes you to where I was going to show you and the tools that can be helpful in calculating service credit. The decision trees there, they have a fact sheet about calculating service credit, and they also have the service credit calculator. So if a district is questioning something, that our system is calculating, direct them here to see maybe how STRS thinks it should be reported. So, if I click on the days that their service credit is calculated by days, I can plug in all of this information and I click calculate, and it's going to produce, that service credit calculation that we can then compare to the system. Okay. So the service credit calculator is super helpful. There's frequently asked questions. There's, calculating service credit. All of these, are super helpful tools when it comes to reporting service credit. Sorry, Andrew, I'm just now seeing your question. It says, I know Mark is working on masking SSNs on reports. Yes, and I can follow up with you on like the JIRA issue number, and that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is coming possibly in the next release, if not the release following. So, and I will make sure that this is, oh, and Bella just, thank you so much. So hopefully that answers your question. That I think is coming very, very soon. So great question. All right, we're gonna hop back to our presentation here and away from service credit. Again, I just wanted to point out those resources that are on STRS's website because I feel like they may not be known and they are very helpful. All right, when it comes to balancing the fiscal year to date report, we have, all of these fields here that are highlighted. We have the value, where that calculation is coming from, right on the PowerPoint. For sake of time, I am not going to go through each and every one of these calculations. They're spelled out, we highlight and then we, address, where those figures are coming from here. I'm going to also point out a couple resources that we, that will take you to a deeper dive into the actual balancing of these reports. So again, for sake of time, I'm not gonna, you can read, I'm not gonna go through these in detail. But, I want to point out that, probably the taxed earnings and taxed advanced amount, these fields should probably typically be zero. I know sometimes, something gets processed and it was a mistake. So this is usually the time that gets caught. So if that is the case, pay particular attention to these two figures here. If there's anything in the taxed earnings or taxed advanced amount field that probably is incorrect, so we need to make sure that that gets fixed before it gets reported to STRS. And again, following right along, down the line, we have where those figures are coming from. And then again, in these taxed pickup, tax deposit / pickup fields and the tax totals, we probably shouldn't have anything in those fields as either. So again, make sure that those say 0 and those get fixed if there's something in them before it's too late. And then again, your retired and rehired employee figures are in the bottom section. So again, I don't want to bore you and go through each and every one of those and where the figures are coming from. We've, outlined those in this PowerPoint here. So hopefully that is helpful when you do go through presenting it to your districts, or if you have questions or they have questions. The advanced positions report is the next report. And again, this is a list of all employees with any accrued contributions. So those employees that are gonna, be treated as advanced earnings and need to be need to be credited in the prior fiscal year as they're processing those amounts over the summer in the next fiscal year. So that's kind of the whole point of doing all of this, right? So the employees must have a position with a retirement code set to STRS, and they have a job status, of active or inactive. The compensation date range must fall within, the academic date range when we're running those dates we entered in W-2 report. The work days on the compensation must equal the days worked, or they will as of June 30th. All right. And I know that there were some questions in the past about the days worked that are showing on the report. If they haven't processed all of their June 30th payrolls yet, they'll still be listed on the advanced positions report, but it might not be the total of the days worked through June 30th. That total is only a total as of the payrolls that they've processed. So that period ending date for that pay group that the compensation is assigned to, that date will only be reflective through the date of the period ending date of the payrolls that they've processed thus far. So, if they're checking this, before they've processed their last pay in June, and there's work days yet to be, included in those upcoming payrolls, then they'll still show on the advanced positions report, but they might not show the days worked that they expected to, show on the report, but they will after they process their last pay in June. So just kind of keep that in the, in the back of your mind. The compensation contract work days and the compensation contract days worked must be greater than 0. Their pays paid must be less than the pays in their contract. And the calculation of the contract obligation minus the amount paid minus the amount docked must be greater than 0. And just as a note that, archived compensations, they will not be included at all. If there is an employee, that's listed on the non-advanced report, and again, they should be on the advanced positions report. At this time, they would have to enter, compensation adjustment to, get those days, equal to the days worked or where they need to be. And then we also want to, add an amount for the amount earned to get that to be what it should be. So typically, if they've worked all of their work days in that contract, then their days worked should equal their work days, and then their compensation amount earned should equal their contract obligation. So they've earned all of, they've worked all their days, so they've earned all of their obligation. But there's going to be an amount then in the accrued wage field, and that's what's then spread over those summer pays and paid to them. So everything's paid out of accrued. All right. So again, here's just an example, of adding that compensation adjustment to get the days worked increased. You can see here in this example, they're a day short. So we would add a day, and then we would also need to add that amount earned for that day, to get their amount earned, corrected, which in turn is gonna update the accrued wage field. And then they would be paid correctly, or that would be reported and paid correctly over the summer months. Here's then, the totals at the bottom, an example of, a specific employee, and then the total section at the bottom. When it comes to calculating then, that advanced amount, I did want to just step through an example because I think sometimes this can be confusing. It's actually calculating out, on a per pay basis. So, in this example, there's, the obligations listed there, the pay per period is listed. And at this time, after they've processed their last pay in June, we have, 4 pays remaining, basically. They've paid 22 out of 26 pays. So the 23rd pay, the system is going to calculate, they're stretch paid, so they're going to be paid their pay per period, and it will take that pay per period times 14%. The 24th pay and 25th pay are the exact same. So we're calculating, the pay per period and then the 14%. When the system detects the last pay, as you all know, it's going to pay off to the penny, right? So the system is going to then take the obligation minus the amount paid, and then pay that, whatever remaining amount is left to be paid, it will pay that off to the penny. So you can see here that when it does that calculation, it actually, is a slightly different amount than their regular pay per period. So instead of $2,359.92, it's gonna pay $2,360. It'll then take that amount times 14%. So that last pay, the amount that's gonna get withheld and reported would be $330.40. So then it's going to then add all of those summer pay amounts. So the $330.39 times 3, and then for that final pay, it's $330.40 to arrive at a final, advance amount to be advanced of $1,321.57. So that's how the system then is calculating that advanced amount. Again, it's, almost on a per pay basis, and then it does its, final calculation pay amount to determine, the cents on that final pay. Just, kind of something that might be helpful to, help users calculate some, or, arrive at some sort of report that will help them balance their advance. They can create a report from the compensation grid and, make sure that all of these fields are included. They can then filter by the last pay date and the retirement code, and then generate, that in Excel format. And then they can use, calculate the advanced amount and compare that then to the advanced positions report in Excel format, and then, merge the two spreadsheets together using VLOOKUP and then calculate any differences. So it's kind of a way to manually, one way, I'm sure every district has their own means of balancing this, but it's a way to grab that paper period, and get that advanced amount from the system. And then, that's what we think it should be. And then use that advanced positions report that the system is actually generating and saying, this is what is going to be, reported, to make sure that those two match up. All right. Again, I'm sure that, districts have many ways of balancing this, but, this would be one way that they could do that. All right. And then lastly is our non-positions report. So we kind of talked a little bit about this already. This is probably the first report that they would want to run, just to make sure that, those that are listed on the report should be, those that are not, aren't. And, again, if there's any questions as to whether a position should be advancing or not advancing, please, advise your districts to reach out to STRS and let the experts make that determination. I know that sort of their golden rule is, how have they been reported in the past? So if a principal is not advancing, hasn't advanced in before, they probably shouldn't advance, this time. However, reach out to them and let them make that determination, and then, we can help them, or you can help them, and we can help you make that work on the system side. All right, so, just slightly different as far as, what criteria needs to be met for some position to be listed on the non-advanced positions report. They have to have a compensation with the type equaling contract. And again, that start and stop date, that range has to fall within the academic year listed on the W-2 report. The retirement code on the position has to equal STRS. And the position status on that position record has to equal active or inactive. And then the work days, the days worked and the work days must be greater than 0. The pays paid must also be less than the pays in contract. And then in this case, the contract days worked will not equal the contract work days, or they won't equal as of June 30th. Okay, so again, just the opposite of the advanced report. And here's an example then of, what the non-advanced report looks like. And it, gives you that days worked versus days in contract, those, two values to show that they don't match, thus the reason they're on the report. All right, that kind of wraps up, all three reports and information regarding those three reports. We do have, a lot more detail in the STRS Advanced Reports section in the user manual. So again, we have errors and warnings and all kinds of, other information, more detail in that chapter. So, don't forget to, it's there as a resource as well. There's balancing information in that chapter. So please use that as another tool when when you have questions. I kind of mentioned this earlier, as far as the balancing goes. I didn't want to take up your entire morning, and we could do that if we got in, a little deeper in the weeds here with the balancing part. But we did take a deeper dive into STRS balancing the last couple years on a Fridays with Fiscal. So I've linked both of those Fridays with Fiscal, from that took the links right from our YouTube channel. And if you go to our YouTube channel and you just do a quick search on the STRS Advance, you'll see the last 2 years that we've, kind of just focused in on the balancing side of things, and those recordings are posted out here. So, if you have questions about that, or, want to refresh your memory, or, if you didn't get a chance to listen to that, yet, go out there, take a listen, and hopefully that will help you brush up on the balancing side of things. All right. After, all those reports are run, balanced, everything is double checked, triple checked, everything looks good. We're going to then create the STRS Advanced Submission file. So there's an option right on the STRS reporting page that allows you to generate the file. Once the file is created, it does create the STRS AD and, with the year and then 06.txt. So that's the file then that we're going to want to use to get to STRS. Whoops. Before we do that, we're going to actually go out and just verify some things on the system side to make sure that, before we go any further, everything looks as it should. And one is on the compensation side, to go out and check that, that STRS checkbox is marked on the individual compensations that should be. And you can, easily check that by going to the compensation grid and checking, that STRS, either adding that to your grid if it's not already there, or, checking that STRS Advanced column, and, just quickly look through, take a quick glance, give it a good look, and make sure that, at least something is marked. That means that, we should be good. The other area to check is the STRS Advanced configuration. So when we create that submission file, it's going out and it's placing the STRS Advanced amount on the configuration screen. Is that amount correct? That amount should match then the total that's listed on the STRS Advanced report. So make sure that those, those amounts, first of all, that there's an amount listed and it's the correct amount. And also then that advanced mode checkbox should be marked. That says, yep, the district is in, STRS Advance. So we've checked the configuration side of things. The district as a whole is good. We've checked the compensation records. Those are all flagged as expected. So now we know we're really, okay, and we're able to move on. Just a note that once we create the submission file, there's a series, a report bundle that runs, and it generates a whole series of reports. So we want to verify that those reports are actually in either the file archive if you have districts that haven't migrated to document storage yet, or they're in document storage. So we're going to go and check that fiscal year end bundle and make sure that all of these reports are listed. If you haven't done the merge yet, at this time, the merge, files or reports, if you do have, if districts are ones that need to merge something, obviously those wouldn't be here yet. So the others, though, your fiscal year to date report, your advanced positions report, your non-advanced positions report, the merge file, I'm sorry, not the merge file, this STRS AD file that we just created should be out there. All right, so we just want to make sure that those are there before we go any further. And then, as we just touched upon, if districts have any kind of third-party file that they need to merge with their system state software file, then we can do that at this time. So they would go to the STRS Advance screen, and there's a section that I'm sure you're all familiar with that's pertains to the merged file area, and the STRS merge files section here, the upload advanced submission file for merge, that's going to be the file from state software. So we're going to go out, we're going to click on choose file and go out and find that STRS AD, this year .06, I'm sorry, 06.txt file. We're going to grab that, and then we're going to move down the line and click on the choose file option for upload file to merge, and that's going to be our third party file. So they will have, had that file saved somewhere on their computer as well. And then we're going to next click generate STRS merge report. We're going to generate a report. We're going to double check that, make sure the total, make sure everything looks, as expected. And then once the report is verified, we're going to click merge files. That then will create that file then, and the merged file is what we want to upload to and submit to STRS. All right. So that's for a merged file, and that's obviously not going to pertain to every single district. So those that do not have a merged file, something to be combined, they're going to go to the upload submission file section on STRS reports and or advanced, I'm sorry, and they would click choose file. They're going to browse to find that file on their computer, and then they would click the submit uploaded file to STRS. Okay, so just kind of one couple less steps there if they don't have a merged file to deal with. Once they've submitted that file, whether it be the merged file that they've uploaded or the non, they don't have a file to merge, they've just submitted their regular STRS file. They do want to go out and verify the STRS Advanced configuration screen. And this is so important. Make sure they go out there and they check that, again, the advanced amount is out there and that amount is right. Make sure that the advanced mode, box is checked like we talked about already. And then now we should have the submitted to USAS, my goodness. It's Friday, right? Submitted to STRS, that's what we're talking about. We should have a value entered in that field. So this tells us, yes, that this, date and time, the file was submitted to, uploaded to STRS, not USAS. So this is just a confirmation. So just one last check that, okay, we've, this configuration screen looks good. It's stamped with the time and date. And that shows that it was submitted to STRS. Just a reminder then, when it comes to submitting that information to STRS, their deadline is always, it's due by the first Friday in August. And if I looked at the calendar correctly, the first Friday in August this year is, happens to be, August 7th. So that's the date then they would need to have their annual report submitted to STRS. And then just kind of, some, continuing on in the closing process, they will want to then close that June, posting period. So they'll click on the close icon that will then close the month of June. And then they would create their July posting period. And that will then, obviously they probably want to check the current box, and that will make their current month then July of 2026. Once they close June, again, there's another reports are added to that fiscal year end report bundle. So we, give it a quick look, go out there, make sure that either in the file archive or the document storage, those additional fiscal year end reports are out there. And we've listed all of those reports, that you should see once that posting period is closed. So just make sure that they're out there and nothing, strange happened. And then step 18, they're ready to begin their first payroll in July. So again, all of fiscal year end for 2026 is complete, and they're ready to start fiscal year end 27, or fiscal year, excuse me, 27. So those are all the steps. And again, they should directly link up to the steps in our year-end checklist. So you should be able to follow right along, with those steps here. And it should, match up. Some things to keep in mind that just to point out, and I'm sure that you're all familiar with these, but just to, refresh your memory, that regular and irregular pay types cannot be used, when a district is in advance. Doc, retro, termination, and payoff of accrued, those pay types can be processed, but keep in mind that they're probably going to affect the STRS balancing. So if, there's a situation where it's, the STRS advance doesn't balance, check and see if those pay types were processed over the summer. And if they were, then that could factor into the balancing issue. Modifying the number of pays paid can also affect STRS balancing. During the payroll process, the fiscal year to date amounts on the 450, the 591, and 691 payroll items will lists both the advanced amounts and new earnings. So for those still thinking back in like classic times, which I know we're kind of getting away from, that is different than how classic handled it. So just be mindful of that. It's a combination of both of those amounts. And then on the pay report, it does list that advanced amount processed for that particular payroll. So, you know, that can be helpful again, balancing time, after, if the district feels like, they've processed their last pay of the advance and the next payroll, there's still an amount out there listed on their pay report, that's a red flag and says, something's off. We need to look into that a little bit further and see what's going on. And then, after the first pay in the advance, when it comes to the STRS per pay report, again, it's going to show those employees that are in the advance, so that can be helpful as well. If somebody's listed, as false and they should be advancing, we probably want to stop and take a good look at what's going on and figure that out. As the summer pays are processed, when it comes to the STRS advanced configuration, in particular, the amount paid back, you're going to see that increase. So as the summer pays are processed, we would, want that amount paid back to be, increased by the amount we just looked at or that we talked about being, listed on the pay report. And then at the end of the summer, when the final advanced, payroll is processed, we would want this amount to equal this amount. And then, that would basically take the district out of the advance. Okay, we'll talk about that in a little more detail shortly. When it comes to some follow-up steps that districts will want to take, one is to schedule the extracts for the auditor of state. So we can use that district audit job. It looks like I have a typo there. Sorry, I'll fix that. Job type in the job scheduler. And that will then run those reports listed. You do want to make sure that we run this after the June posting period, like after that time has passed, because those reports are going to run based on the prior fiscal year. So we want to run those, in July. So that's kind of, why it's a follow-up step. We also want to go out and after all of the advanced payrolls have been processed, we want to make sure that, again, that STRS advanced configuration is verified. So either somebody, should be responsible at the district level, or if you're an ITC that handles that on your district's behalf. But we want to make sure that basically the advance balanced. So we want to assure that the advanced mode checkbox is off or not checked, and the amount paid back is 0, and the advanced amount is 0. So all of those fields then should basically be blank or unmarked. So as we just talked about, just a few minutes ago, when the system detects that the advanced amount paid back is equal to or greater than, and the greater than's a key, than the advanced amount, then that's when the flag will be, the advanced mode checkbox is unmarked, and then the amount paid back and the advanced amount will be 0. So Just because we check this doesn't necessarily mean that the advance balanced, because as I said, equal to or greater than. So we do want to be mindful of, keep in mind that it can be greater than, and that would mean probably that the advance didn't balance, right? So keep that in mind. If the amount paid back is less than the advanced amount, then the advanced mode flag, that checkbox remains checked, and the amount paid back value remains. So that's a guaranteed indication that something went wrong in our advanced balancing. Okay. We're going to take this one step further and just talk or point out about, why at this point, maybe if I check a district's advanced configuration, why is it showing zeros? The box is unmarked. Like what, why is that happening? Even if the district didn't balance. So what happens is the amount paid back, that's actually calculated based on the current year. So January 1st hits, nothing has been paid or paid back in the current year, right? So we're in 26. So that is going to show 0. So everything basically, will get, the amount paid back gets zeroed out once January 1st hits, because nothing has been paid back as of this current calendar year. So again, just an example, if we're processing fiscal year 26 and the advance didn't balance, it would show a difference, and that difference would show up through the end of December. But once January 1st hits 2027, that amount paid back is cleared because nothing has been paid back in calendar year 27, and it will display 0. All right. So that can be we've had questions on that come up. So I thought, well, let's just explain how it works and why you're seeing what you're seeing at different times throughout, the year. All right. When it comes to the correction side, if something didn't balance, if you have, the first thing you want to check is, has a July payroll been processed? And then that determines kind of the direction you take when it comes to the corrections that are necessary. So if a July payroll has been processed, then to isolate the issues, you want to run the check STRS advanced report. Make sure you sort it in the same sorting order as you process the advanced positions report. Again, just a note on the dates that you'll want to use the period beginning date for the first summer pay, and then the period ending date of the last summer pay. So unfortunately, it's not the pay dates, it's period beginning and ending dates. On the STRS side, they want to contact STRS, explain to them. I'm not sure of the exact correction process that they require, but they'll reach out to them, note that it's something for a prior fiscal year needs corrected, and then they can work with STRS on making the correction on their side. On our side, there are some adjustments that need to be made so that this doesn't creep into the next fiscal year. So, we have corrections that need to be made on the 450, the 591, and if the 691 applies. And in those, spreadsheets, we have, on the 450, the gross needs to be adjusted. On the 591, the amount withheld gets adjusted. And then on the 691, it's the board amount of a payroll item that gets adjusted. So we have those screenshots here that give you a look at how those adjustments need to be created. On the ITC side, then we do have looks like my move this down. We do have a section in the STRS Advanced chapter that outlines those correction steps. So you'll need to go to that advanced configuration and unmark or uncheck that advanced mode checkbox. And then, basically use the mass change definition to take or move everybody's STRS advanced field to be false. So we have a mass change definition that can be run to do that for you. Excuse me. If a July payroll has not been run, then again, this is a little easier when it comes to correcting things. On your side, you can go to the compensation grid, and again, basically we're gonna start over. We're gonna unflag those compensations so that the everybody's taken out of the advance, so that checkbox is unmarked. So you can run, that report definition, that mass change definition, and just make sure that those totals match what the advanced report total advanced positions stated, so that we're making sure that we unflag all the positions compensations that should have been. On the district side, then they would again start over. So they're gonna correct whatever errors need to be corrected, and then they're gonna go through the process of, running those reports again, their STRS advanced reports, creating their submission file and uploading that to STRS, after they have their merge file merged, if that's applicable. All right. Are there any questions on anything that we talked about as far as fiscal year end processing goes? I know that's a lot in a short amount of time, and I appreciate your attention because I know we're running a little longer than normal. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat. I've probably put everybody to sleep. But just some follow-up things that districts can, start thinking about doing now. And those are, job calendars for 26-27 school year. If those, I'm assuming those have probably already been approved by the board. So if they haven't already thought about adding those, those will need to be added before they start thinking about new contracts. So we want to enter all of those calendars. We're going to create those new contracts for the 27 fiscal year. And then we can also create any non-contracts for the fiscal year. If districts update those existing or they create new, they can do that for their non-contracts as well. And then just a reminder, when it comes to EMIS reporting, they do want to, make sure that they submit their final L collection. And if I looked at the data collector calendar correctly, that is set to close on August 5th. So they'll want to make sure that they get that final L collection submitted prior to that date. And then once they have their final collection submitted, you know, somebody at some point, either at the ITC, you at the ITC, or the district will want to move that EMIS reporting configuration to 2027. So that when they do start doing their first collection, their uh, collection in for next school year, that it's grabbing the right information. And then also just keep in mind that any, compensations that were for last fiscal year, those, can be archived so that they, if districts don't want to have those automatically, visible on their current compensation records, they can go ahead and archive those. But we do ask that obviously we want to wait until after your final collection for period L is completed, because it can cause lots of heartaches and headaches, and I know you may have run into that situation. So we do ask that you wait to update the EMIS reporting configuration year, as well as archiving those compensations. All right, I added some flowers to this because we, all need a little happiness and cheer, and it's going to be Mother's Day weekend this weekend. So I thought that was kind of fitting. So are there any questions before we wrap things up today? Will there be a Fridays with Fiscal on the new personal leave conversion options? So Andrew, we don't have a Fridays with Fiscal scheduled just for that, to cover that particular option in the software. However, we will definitely be covering it on our recap session. So we'll go into detail as to how that new option is going to work and what it's going to look like and all that on our upcoming recap session. And we also are going to do a feature article in an upcoming newsletter. So look for that in May. So we're going to cover all things leave, basically balancing and the new option, and all things leave, so that hopefully districts will get a good feel for how that's all going to work. So hopefully that will be sufficient. We do have plans on touching on it a couple different times, just not in its own Fridays with Fiscal, if that's okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, again, I want to wish all of you a wonderful weekend. I feel like we're all mothers, and we are all influences on people in some way. So celebrate you, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be, I'm sure in touch very soon on all things fiscal year end related. So enjoy this breath of fresh air for the time being, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you.